So I want to give you a reminder, because it still is early in 2026. No spin means we don't pander, we don't propagandize, and we don't push ideology. That's what no spin means. It's like we try to analyze the news based on every possible fact we can accumulate. That separates us from almost everybody else. Okay? Because most people have a preconceived, I'm going to say this because that's what my audience wants to hear. We don't do that. All right? And so when we're analyzing very important stories, like the rebellion that's going on now in the United States, we have to gather an enormous amount of information in order to make sense of it all. And I'll prove it again this evening, beginning with the talking points memo. So I wrote a column, posted on BillO'Reilly.com, filed it on Saturday, called The Rebellion. So there are 8 states that are rebelling against the federal government's immigration law. I will list them in a moment. Okay? And what does that mean? It just means they refuse to obey the law. That's a rebellion. This is the sanctuary city movement, but it's more than that. Okay, so on Saturday, you saw one of those states, Minnesota, host a demonstration against the ICE shooting of last week. A couple of thousand people showed up, and there's nothing wrong with people protesting. That's what we do in America when we don't think something is wrong. But this protest was sponsored by a far-left group called the Minnesota Immigration Rights and Action Committee. This was an ideological protest, not an organic protest, okay? It was organized exclusively by the far left to seek people's presence on the far left. That's what this was all about. Okay. Authorities in Minneapolis arrested 29 people, and they were throwing chunks of ice and other debris at the local cops. Feds had no presence here. So a local demonstration. All right? And one police officer was hurt. That's the who, what, when, where, and why of the rally. The people who attended the rally are in one category. They are leftists who hate the Trump administration. Roll the tape.
There was another instance of someone in our city being killed, being murdered by law enforcement, and I'm ready to be done with it.
I love my community, I love my city, and I hate what's happening to it with people who frankly aren't from here coming in and telling us who should be here. And when it comes down to loving my neighbor, I'm just going to love my neighbor.
Here's ICE riding through our neighborhoods, destroying families, destroying businesses, tearing our communities apart, and they're not being held accountable. And that's why we're here. We're out here to demonstrate, to try to hold them accountable.
Okay, fine. But that's not what really that is. That is an open border. We don't want any law enforcement to confront undocumented migrants. We don't want it. You let them in, they do what they want. That's what these people stand for, but they're never honest about it. That shouldn't be a surprise. 75 million people voted for Kamala Harris, who supported President Biden's open border policy and didn't want any law enforcement against people, foreign nationals, who came into the country illegally. Kamala Harris wouldn't have done anything. Would have continued on the open border and let people just wave on it. Okay? 75 million Americans voted for her. A lot of folks. So of course you're going to have that. Now, the 8 states in open rebellion are these: California, Oregon, Washington State, Colorado, Minnesota, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. New York and Vermont are right on the edge there. I don't have them on there because there's a dialogue, at least, going on with Washington, but you can put them on there. And when you have 10 states, it's basically telling the federal government, we're not going to obey your law. You have what they had before the Civil War. It's exactly the same thing. And I make the point in the column that from 1830 to 1860, 30 years, Southern states said, we're not going to obey whatever you say. And we're not just talking slavery, we're talking tariffs, we're talking almost everything. Andrew Jackson slapped them down. Okay? But then we had a series of weak presidents like Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan who let the South rise in ferocity. And then we had the Civil War. That was a rebellion against the federal government. Only other time in our history we've seen this was during the Vietnam War. But that was a populist uprising. Started out ideological, but then the war got out of control because of Lyndon Johnson's incompetency and deceit. And the American people, and that just cut across almost every barrier, said enough of this. And the demonstrations happened. And violence happened. Kent State, National Guard, and a lot of other areas. Now, the federal government at this point has a couple of obligations. Has to enforce the law. Has to. But they can de-escalate violent confrontations. So if ICE agents see that there's a person like Ms. Good impeding their investigation with an automobile, the vehicle, then you de-escalate that. You arrest her later, which they could have done easily. All right? You don't up it, because if there's a lot more violence, then the Trump administration is going to lose the country. It's going to. You got to de-escalate in any kind of potential violent situation. Now, that doesn't mean if the ICE agents are attacked that they can't fight back. They should fight back. I'm not saying that. But if you can lessen potential violence, you have to do that. And that's not just me saying it, that's every law enforcement agency in the country has that in their manual. Okay, if you don't have to use lethal force, you don't. Get it later. Do it later. Now, that's number one. Number two, 77 million Americans voted for Donald Trump. And that vote needs to be respected. It's not respected by the left. Okay, it's not. And it's probably a vice versa on that too. But when 77 million Americans say we want immigration law enforced, you got to enforce it. The Trump administration is not doing anything wrong theoretically. Okay? But the ICE commanders have got to know that there's a volatile situation. Because if it gets worse, the Democrats are going to win the midterms. And they're making their stand not on the economy now, because the economy is pretty good. They're making their stand on this. This is the hill they're standing on. Illegal immigration. I think that's foolish. I believe most Americans see this Minnesota stuff for what it is. A provocation of the federal government, a rebellion against social order. I believe most of us see that. And the Democratic Party is standing opposed to that. It's going to hurt them, particularly because it's a weak party with no leader. But if you are calling ICE Gestapo and you are supporting open borders and no supervision of foreign nationals, and you won't even cooperate in the 10 states that I mentioned with criminal migrant investigations, you wouldn't even cooperate then, America's going to walk away from you, in my opinion. Summing up, the federal government has to enforce immigration law, but it has to be done a little bit differently now. Situation is just too volatile. We don't want dead people. Yeah. but we do want people held accountable. And that's a memo. Let's go to the Clintons, Bill and Hillary. They've been asked to testify in front of the House Oversight Committee tomorrow and Wednesday, the president tomorrow and the former Secretary of State on Wednesday. They're not going to show up. I'll be stunned if they show up. So what happens then? The Oversight Committee, James Comer, says, we want your depositions, closed door, private, about Epstein. Why? Because Bill Clinton took 26 trips aboard Epstein's plane, a lot of them in conjunction with the Clinton Foundation, which Hillary Clinton is a chief officer of. That's why. That's legit, I think, right? So they're supposed to show up, but they're not going to show up. And then what happens? Joining us now from Washington is lawyer Bob Driscoll. He is a partner in Dickinson and Wright. He's very well experienced in these matters. So we have a frame of reference with Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon. Both defied subpoenas to appear before Congress, and both were sent to prison because of it, correct?
Yes. They both blew off their subpoenas completely. There was a referral to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice prosecuted both of them and gained convictions. And both cases went up on appeal, and both convictions were upheld.
Okay, so that was Merrick Garland and Joe Biden, the president. And they put them in the jail, and Navarro and Bannon both said, okay, I'm willing to do the time. Now, that's not going to happen with Bill and Hillary Clinton, is it?
I wouldn't be so sure. I think it could happen.
Do you think the sitting president, a former president of the United States, is going to get sentenced to prison because he won't show up and testify?
I think there's a chance. I think that the precedent is there. The better approach for him to take would be to show up and object if they can object to specific questions as harassing, as irrelevant, as simply asking embarrassing questions for the sake of that. But the ability of Congress to issue subpoenas is pretty well established. There are limited circumstances where courts have held that Congress has gone too far. But I think that he's in better shape to protect himself by either showing up and objecting to the questions, having his lawyer object to the questions he thinks go too far, he doesn't want to answer, or by filing suit immediately before he's supposed to show up and trying to challenge the subpoena in a federal court in Washington.
So
but to just blow off the subpoena puts him at risk of being held in contempt, because the committee can hold him in contempt, refer to the whole House to hold him in contempt, and then the House would vote to hold him in contempt and make a referral to the Department of Justice.
Yeah, the House is so close, though, it might not, he might not get, he might not lose. But even if they don't show up this week, and are you thinking they're going to show up tomorrow and Wednesday?
My guess would be that they will either show up or they will file suit in D.C. to try to challenge the subpoena and drag it out in litigation. Okay. I just think it's too big a risk to not show up at all. The case law is pretty clear that the courts do not like it if you blow off a subpoena completely. If there's a dispute over what you say when you're there, okay.
No, I got it, but there's no, tomorrow we looked at the House oversight schedule, there's nothing on it. The subpoena still stands. Yeah. So I understand, though, that they would have a second chance. They would get warned by Comer, and if they don't come next time or whatever, then they're going to get it. Will they give them a second chance if they don't show up this week?
Typically, the way this would work and the way the chances he would get is the committee would schedule a vote to vote on contempt. And presumably he could cure his contempt by saying he would show up before they took that vote. After that, the whole House could vote. The other thing that's happened this year that's a new development in this area of law is Jim Jordan made a referral of a witness for his committee straight to the Department of Justice for obstruction when he didn't he thought the witness was too obstreperous and wouldn't answer the questions, and he made a straight referral to the Department of Justice without going through a contempt hearing. So I just think there's a lot of risk for the former president and the former first lady to not show up at all. They've got experienced counsel. I'm sure they're looking at all of this. But I mean, I wouldn't bank on him. If there were a Democratic DOJ, okay, great. That they would probably be open to hearing that this is a harassing subpoena and doesn't have to do with the merits and all.
That's going to be very tough when you're on a plane.
This DOJ, they're not going to want to hear that.
No,
and I think that they're going to be
that's partisan.
Sore over the Bannon case, and they're going to say, look, if our guy had to go to jail, so do you.
That's partisan, though. It'll, as you know, go beyond it'll go into the federal court system. And if you are on Epstein's plane 26 times under the banner of the Clinton Foundation, you got to ask the questions about that. So the courts are going to go, it's a legitimate line of questioning. This isn't something just to embarrass the Clintons. Last word.
I think not showing up puts him in the worst position because his argument there is there's not one relevant question I could be asked. And that's clearly not true. The better course for him is to show up and answer what is fairly asked and object if he thinks they're trying to make a spectacle of it or asking inappropriate questions just for the sake of exposing personal flaws he may have.
Okay.
But I think not showing up is not a great idea for him, and I think he's at risk if he doesn't do it.
All right. Well, we're obviously on it. Thank you, Counselor. Appreciate your time very much. All right, overseas, Iran. So all of the internet is down. Very hard to get anything out of there. There are pictures of the demonstrations. They've been going on since December 28th. Government's tottering, no question about that. I did talk to President Trump about this over the weekend. And I don't like to, it's a private conversation, but I can report that my take on it is that U.S. doesn't do military action unless it would be decisive. So if there's a tip that would get rid of the mullahs, who are obviously murderers, they killed between 500 and 1,000 people already, according to the rights organizations, the human rights organizations. So there's a tip that you can use military to bomb something or do something to get them out of there. I support that. But just a random, no. I think it's going to go. But boy, it's slow. Because that police state is tight. It's not as tight as Cuba. Okay, Cuba, but the people there are starving now. And there's no oil going in, so that means they can't cool off their homes, they can't cook their food, they're going to go. But Cuba is actually a tighter police state than Iran because of the size. It's easy to regulate the island of Cuba. It's not easy to regulate a big country like Iran. But both of them may go in the next few weeks, which is just, and that's what the conversation between the president and myself was all about, the new realignment of the world, which is taking place. Greenland. So this one isn't nearly at the level of Venezuela, Cuba, or Iran. This is a matter of military bases and mineral rights. Okay. I think the Secretary of State Rubio is doing an excellent job. And I have somebody in there very close. He's not going to support military action, Rubio. He's not. Because two things would happen. The American public would turn against the entire Republican Party and Trump administration. It's never going to happen that Americans are going to support military action against Greenland, ever. And number two, you can get the same thing you want by negotiation. The Danes, they don't have a lot of emotion invested in Greenland. Okay? Make a deal. And there are supposed to be meetings this week in Washington between the Danish government, which oversees Greenland, and Secretary of State Rubio. So I'm just praying, and I use that word literally, they work it out. Here's a final thought of the day. Watching the Islanders, my favorite hockey team, and this happened. Roll the tape.
Schaefer had his stick snapped and quickly was handed a stick. And now racing to the bench is Heineman to pick up a new twig. As he quickly handed his off to Schaefer. Barzal has it. Puck floats off his stick, so the zone cleared by the factor, and that is Ryan O'Reilly. He is so good, they just called him the O'Reilly factor, right? He impacts every player he seems to play with.
That's right. That was his nickname in St. Louis. His teammates gave him that. They called him the, not the factor. That's a huge, huge compliment. And he certainly won the Conn Smythe. He's played international for Canada, Stanley Cup winner in St. Louis as the captain. He's earned that nickname.
Well, it's a compliment to us, that's for sure. And Ryan O'Reilly is a tremendous player. I got a call from Dennis Miller years back when he was at a St. Louis Blues game and Ryan O'Reilly was playing for the Blues. He said, hey, they're all chanting the factor when Ryan O'Reilly comes out. So thank you. That's all I can say. It's a nice compliment when you go Islanders, second place. Come on, we're watching them. Thank you for watching and listening to the First Place No Spin News. We'll see you again tomorrow. It will teach you a lot about not only the conflict in Minneapolis with ICE, but the world. And I'm going to go through this in a very methodical way. We always want your feedback. Bill@BillO'Reilly.com, Bill@BillO'Reilly.com. Now, as you know, our mantra is people believe what they want to believe. And that's about 90% of the population, the human population. So, you know, facts, not a lot of facts matter. It's all emotion. They believe what they want to believe. So within minutes of this terrible shooting in Minneapolis, people were forming sides. All right. The left, which does not want immigration enforcement, they were demonizing ICE. And the right, which does want the federal government to control illegal immigration, was demonizing the left and some, but not too many, the actual victim herself, who was a leftist. Okay. Now, I'm going to go right through this in the talking points memo. So obviously, up top, anybody celebrating the death of another human being needs to see a psychiatrist. So let's get that out of the way, virtue signaling, whatever you want to label it. Nobody should be dead. And it didn't have to happen. And it happened because of bad decision making. That's why this woman is dead. Her name is Renee Nicole Good. All right, she's the mother of 3 children, including a 6-year-old son. She's a lesbian. She lives with a female partner. Why does that matter? Because it's not clear now where the younger boy will wind up, and I'm very concerned about him. 15-year-old daughter, 12-year-old son, they live with their father. Okay? So we're always very concerned about children in situations like this. Now, her mother, Ms. Good's mother, says she was not an activist, but she was. She's a very ardent liberal, and my sources in both Colorado, where she lived, and in Minnesota, she wasn't a bomb-throwing Antifa, but she was emotionally involved in left-wing causes. So the first bad decision which led to her death was she should not have been interrupting a federal investigation, which she was. And she had parked her car to try to impede federal agents. That is a terrible decision, particularly when you have 3 children. Now, I'm not blaming her for her death. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just saying that bad decisions lead to bad outcomes. Okay? There's no reason on earth why that woman should have put herself in that kind of jeopardy. And if you're watching me tonight anywhere in the world do the same thing, you're likely to get hurt and you may die. You do not impede authorities on the job. Anywhere, anytime. You do not do that. That's not protest. Now, right after the woman was killed, you had this unbelievable far-left garbage saying that she was a legal observer or some kind of crazy stuff. She was not. She's breaking the law. That's obstruction of justice, what she did. All right? Now, the most important thing that I have said so far in this whole reportage, I repeated last night on Cuomo. Roll the tape. Well, number one, I'm not going to second guess a law officer. That's cheap, and I'm not going to do it. All right, I wasn't there, and anybody doing that should reevaluate. Number two, this is a story about bad decisions. And in your life and everybody's life, if you make a number of bad decisions, you're going to pay the price. Okay, so I do not think it is fair for anybody to condemn that officer who shot Ms. Good. What you would need to make a decision on that is enhanced videotape. As you sit in a room, it would go frame by frame from every angle. And then you would need to hear the agent himself testify what his state of mind was. These are split-second decisions. It really angers me. I'll tell you what, you see these people on television do this? I really think it's so immoral, but I'm not doing it. Okay? I am not doing it. I have been in situations, wife death, guns involved. Okay? I know the adrenaline flow. I am not going to pass judgment on that man. Not. And I didn't pass judgment on Ms. Good either. I just said it was a bad decision for her to be in a car impeding a federal investigation, blocking it. Now, the bad decision making goes back to Joe Biden. That's where it goes. That is the genesis of this story. So you allow millions of people unsupervised to come into the United States, you're going to have a criminal element come in, and they're going to kill people, which they have. And therefore, your decision-making, Mr. Biden, has led to death and destruction, and has led to now President Trump having to correct your terrible decision by employing federal authorities to arrest and deport criminal aliens and others who are not in this country illegally. Remember, they all have to have a warrant. But the ICE is not making that decision on the street. They're going after criminal aliens, okay? And if there are other non-criminal aliens with them, they get swept up. That all goes back to Joe Biden. That bad decision that he made, probably the worst presidential decision of all time, has led to this woman's death yesterday. In addition, the people who run states like California, Illinois, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Massachusetts, and others made a decision not to obey federal law. We are not going to obey federal law. This is rebellion. That's what it is. It's like what South Carolina and other southern states did in the 1850s. We are going to rebel against the federal government. There is an immigration law. We are not going to uphold it. And Minnesota is perhaps the worst because they won't even cooperate when criminal migrants are involved. That decision-making on the part of Governor Walz and Mayor Jacob Fry in Minneapolis did contribute to the death of Ms. Good because those two men incited Ms. Good. How did they do that? Well, listen to for yourself. Go.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye, just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those vans, and disappeared.
To ICE, get the f*** out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite. People are being hurt. Families are being ripped apart.
Now, very early on in President Trump's first term, I discussed this with him, and I said, look, you have a case that you can make against these sanctuary states. The Justice Department can sue them for big money. And that's what should have happened. It did not. It didn't happen. But there's no question that Walz and Fry are inciting, all right, actions against the federal government. Of course they are. You can't deny that. Who could deny that? And this poor woman is caught up in that hysteria. Now on to the Trump administration. When you have a $9 billion fraud perpetrated by a number of illegal migrants from Somalia, when $9 billion is stolen from the American taxpayer, you have an obligation to send Homeland Security agents to the site where the $9 billion fraud took place. That's not an option. That's an obligation. Now, Walz and Fry, they don't care about the $9 billion. They looked the other way. They had to know. They had to know. And they allowed it. So you can't deal with them. They're in rebellion against the United States. So President Trump orders 2,000 ICE into Minneapolis to not only round up criminal aliens, and these Somalis who participated in this fraud are criminal aliens, but to impose a kind of order in Minneapolis, which is lacking. So if you want to make an equivalency, you can't, because the President of the United States, it could be anybody, there's an obligation to stop a $9 billion fraud. Expose it, prosecute it. Then you have unbelievable media, and I'm not going to get into that today, who, again, they follow the PAC, and the PAC hates Trump. So the bad decision-making is, we're not going to try to find out what happened. We're just going to condemn Trump and everything he does. Then you have a de-escalation order. Now remember, every police agency in the country, local, state, and feds, the agency teaches to de-escalate any kind of potential life-threatening situation. That's a fact. Now, you people who are on the side, if you want to use that phraseology, of the police, have to know that. The ICE agents in this case did not de-escalate. They didn't. And that's a fact. Now, I'm not condemning anybody. I'm just saying that de-escalation is the rule of the land in police agencies. A lot of people don't understand that. And that did not happen in Minneapolis yesterday. Okay, so all of these things were swirling around when I went on News Nation last night with the three Americans, Cuomo, Stephen A. Smith, and myself. Roll the tape.
Bill O'Reilly, may I chime in and speak? May I chime in and speak to you directly, Bill? Here's where I'm disappointed, Bill. Here's where I'm disappointed, Bill, in your response. So you can have an opinion about her, but you can't have an opinion about the officer, even though you've seen the video numerous times. You've seen the video. I've watched it 10 times.
I can't put myself in his shoes. I think it's irresponsible to do that.
Okay.
Because I don't know the state of mind of the man when a vehicle is coming at him. It's irresponsible to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Okay. I'm coming to you. Let me be irresponsible. A 37-year-old woman, she wasn't coming down the street going 90 miles an hour. She was stationary. She was still. And then she took off. So you had to move out the way as she was taking off, okay? And you shoot her in the head?
Let me reply to that. I'm for de-escalation. I support de-escalation. In every kind of a situation, not just this. I don't want to see anybody die. All right? So if I were there, I'd like to think that I would have tried to de-escalate. But it's not fair of me, because I don't know the state of mind of the officer when he sees a vehicle lurch forward, and I'm not going to condemn it. I am not going to do that, no matter how many videos you show. Show it to a grand jury, a federal grand jury, and let them decide after forensics and this and that, and hearing the officer. Okay.
What she did is not worthy of the death penalty, but it's about where you start the chain of causation, Stephen A., with about why they were there in the first place.
Well, I wanted to throw out this question to Bill, in all honesty, because I appreciate his candor. I don't agree with his position totally, but I respect it, and I respect where he's coming from. What I would ask you in return is this, Bill. So, of course, where things start, that matters. And we understand that. That was instigated by her action. Some people was on the left will say it's instigated by ICE because they shouldn't be there, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going there.
Stephen A., you got a big vehicle coming at you from 10 feet away. That's a situation.
He was right in front of the car.
On. And let the people deliberate on it. There is a system. All right? And I will trust what the people in a federal grand jury or whatever forum decide. Not us. And that's the right way to handle this. Now, there is a report that the federal government is not turning over all the evidence to the local authorities in Minnesota. I'm not surprised by that. The FBI does not trust law enforcement in Minneapolis. They simply don't trust it. And neither do I, because they're under the orders of Walz. And Walz is a fanatical anti-Trump in rebellion to the United States guy. That's the truth. All right. Now, going forward, the Trump administration is not going to capitulate to this, and they shouldn't. There has to be order. The laws have to be enforced. But the sanctuary places, you got to take action against them. You got to stop this. All right, these sanctuary people, the FBI should interview Jacob Frey and Governor Walz and say, look, you're on the verge of incitement here and rebellion here. That's where you are. Because that's what the truth. You can't have this. And we had it before the Civil War, and anybody who's read my book, Killing Lincoln or Confronting the Presidents, knows it. Can't allow this stuff, or you're not going to have a country. Okay, so finally, we're going to stay on a story. And on Monday, we'll encapsulate it again. But I'm going to offer mass for both the victim and the officer on Sunday. I want you to know that. And that's a memo. If you had one holiday wish, would you wish to be debt-free? Well, I may have a solution for you. Before year-end, credit card and loan companies close out their books, meaning lenders might be able to open negotiations, which gives you leverage. And Done with Debt knows how to use that to negotiate hard on your behalf. They monitor lender trends and pressures to help you escape from crushing debt without bankruptcy or new loans. From month one, Done with Debt works to reduce your total debt, leave you with more money every month. Start now because your leverage may disappear at year end. Chat for free with a Done with Debt specialist at donewithdebt.com. That's donewithdebt.com, donewithdebt.com. And don't forget to tell them O'Reilly sent you. Jeffrey Halstead joins us from Las Vegas. He is associated with the Genesis operation. It's an emergency management company. Mr. Halstead used to be the police chief of Fort Worth, Texas, big job. And then he went federal. Okay, he also worked with a variety of state law enforcement agencies. So why do you think this is a big drop in particularly violent crime in the USA?
Well, thank you, Bill. It's a great opportunity to speak with you. So one of the true reasons you can see this is because we in the law enforcement culture have innovated, we have deployed technology, and we are working better together than ever before in the history of American policing. With that said, real-time crime centers, fusion centers, the ability to work city, county, state, and federal all collectively to find bad people, it's happening faster than ever. But you are right. Some of these policy changes can make these numbers shift a little bit in different directions. But I can say on behalf of the American law enforcement mission, it is strong after coming back from a defund movement and really almost villainizing all these officers. They're out there working day in and day out to keep Americans safe.
Is it high tech that's aiding the officers on the street? Is it making it easier to prevent crimes? Because, for example, here on Long Island, where I am, they have what they call shot. The police in Central Place can hear any gunfire that takes place, and you get the units there very quickly. And then the bad guys know that they're being surveilled much tighter than they used to be. Is that part of it?
Absolutely, that's part of it. Good analogy, and I'll expand on that a little bit. Now we have drones as first responders, where our goal in law enforcement will get to emergency calls in less than 5 minutes. Drones are there in 30 seconds. And then with license plate reader technology deployed all over major, city and metropolitan regions, they're scanning thousands of license plates per second. So once we get a hit, and it's announced to everybody there, and we have drones as a first responder with these other shot spotter technologies, it's bad days for serial criminals, because they even talk on some of their criminal podcasts how much they hate drones and advancing technology because they can't get away fast enough.
Okay. So the high tech, and I'm sure the artificial intelligence to come, is a big tool to stop crime, to inhibit bad people from doing things, because the odds of them getting caught are higher. But in some municipalities like New York and San Francisco, LA, Chicago, the prosecutions have dropped. So you can steal in California less than $1,000 and you're not charged with a felony, or you're not charged at all. How has that hurt law enforcement?
Well, it's challenged us because now we are building some public-private partnership with a lot of retail associations, a lot of task forces, and even and building stronger relationship with these elected officials, county attorney and district attorneys. It does strengthen our capacity to get cases prosecuted. But what we do now is we go after serial offenders where a volume of offenses are lumped together, and with strong relationships in the prosecutorial environment, these cases are being seen now, and these much more serial offenders, they're being taken off the streets within the hour. So, I applaud the men and women, both in the retail association, private security, working with us and then leveraging that strengthened relationships back to our elected officials. The system is better today than it was 5 years ago, and the technology is giving it faster going forward.
All right, final question, though. You were in Fort Worth as a police chief, okay? Now, Fort Worth has always been a conservative place. Tarrant County, right?
Yes, sir.
And then I was working in Dallas for the ABC affiliate there. Dallas is a liberal city. And the difference in crime fighting was, pretty stark, and just 20 miles away between your crew in Fort Worth and the Dallas crew. How much of that do you feel is going on around the country? That it depends where you are, how far you are protected.
On the onset, if you just look at the surface, what you said is exactly true. 28 miles apart, Dallas and Fort Worth are starkly different. However, the brotherhood and sisterhood of the law enforcement mission is stronger than ever. We really never ever bring in politics in any of our decision-making, task force operations, or the people that we need to go get. And we are trying to strengthen those partnerships with technology so we can work collectively together and faster.
I never had a doubt. I have a little bit of doubt about the Minneapolis police chief after hearing him today say that the woman who was shot in Minneapolis was fleeing the scene. I don't believe the evidence is going to back him up, and that's going to be a problem. And you know as well as I do, because you're a guy that your operation, Genesis, operates everywhere in the United States. There is a big difference among how law enforcement is seen. Mr. Offset, thanks very much. We really appreciate your expertise, and I hope we can talk again soon. Thank you. Final thought. So WABC, as I mentioned before, is our flagship radio station. We have 300 radio stations around the country carry my commentary. And we're very pleased to be on WABC, which is the dominant number one, not only in the New York metropolitan area, which is the biggest market, but around the country, because you can access WABC radio from your computer now, from your smartphone now. Just punch up WABC News Radio Live, and there it pops up. So I was on Sid and Friends this morning, of course, talking about Minneapolis. Roll the tape.
So we get every morning the blast that these dishonest people send out to the media. It's really unbelievable how they do it. And then politicians and pundits pick up the exact wording. So this is a legitimate observer, this woman who was killed. Now, she's not a legitimate observer. She was breaking the law by what she did. And that's why she's dead. And I feel terrible. You're a 6-year-old child.
Yeah.
This woman.
Right.
So anybody that celebrates that or is happy that she's dead, you need to see a psychiatrist.
And by the way, not only is nobody happy she's dead, but the person that is least happy that she's dead is this poor cop.
Of course. His life now is in absolute turmoil.
So anyway, a heads up on WABC, well worth seeking out. I'm on there on Katz and Cosby Mondays at the end of their program, on Sid every day, commentary, and then an extended segment at 9 a.m. on Thursdays. So if you want to check us out. Very nice of you to watch us tonight. We got a whole bunch of stuff coming over the weekend. Stay close to BillO'Reilly.com. We'll see you again on